that in previous interventions, I have presented the basic features of the deep state, and I will quickly recall them and focus on the organic relations between these components. Of course, the deep state was historically considered to be part of what is called the military-industrial complex, meaning the companies that manufacture weapons and which were influential in making foreign policy decisions in the United States. This concept developed, and several institutions or a group of institutions were added to the military-industrial complex that contributed to forming what is called today the military-industrial complex, which is present. First, the military-industrial complex includes the federal state through the Ministry of Defense, the political military manufacturing companies, in addition to the security and intelligence institutions, which perhaps form an integrated link in this topic. Then, technology institutions were added to the military-industrial complex, especially in communication and even in scientific research, which are funded by the parties in the Pentagon or the weapons manufacturing companies, because these institutions' technological applications are in defense. The third element, which is perhaps very important, is the media. The media plays a role in promoting all internal policies. There have been transformations in the media structure in the United States since the 1980s, making it centralized in only 5 or 6 companies, through which it is possible to control public opinion or shape it, if it is permissible to say so. Of course, in return for this consolidation of the media, we will talk about it quickly. The fourth institution, which is very, very important, and perhaps the backbone of every military-industrial complex or the deep state, is the financial institution. This is composed primarily of the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank. The Ministry of Treasury, banks, and financial institutions, and perhaps in this quadrilateral, meaning the integrated and organic relationship, one can go into detail to clarify how all of these institutions are linked to each other. These are the financial institutions that we will talk about later. The fifth element is the research centers, which are part of the intellectual and political structure of the deep state's orientations. This means that if the deep state is involved in foreign policy, you only have to review the products of these research centers, which also have an organic relationship with the financial institutions, media institutions, and military manufacturing companies. Last but not least, there is what is called the academic complex. This means that universities, especially major universities, are part of the deep state for several reasons. First, they produce the elites who assume positions in management and companies. The voice of Dr. Ziad has become louder now, though unfortunately, the image has been removed this time. Yes, it will be better anyway. In any case, there is no sound. What would you like to reopen? I've reopened it for you again, Dr. Ziad. Yes, you're welcome. Yes, but after the pictures, even though you removed it. Yes, you removed the voice instead of the picture. Excuse me. Exactly what they are saying. Music. The university complex, especially large and prestigious universities, is part and parcel of the deep state because it produces the elites and figures who assume key positions and tasks. It also forms the base which we can relate to research centers that formulate policies. This is more detailed when we speak about it. Of course, all of this is added to the components of what is called the bureaucratic administrative body, as well as some institutions or lobbies such as the pharmaceutical companies complex. This complex had a major role in shaping hospitalization policies, health insurance policies, and notably had a significant role in the COVID-19 pandemic and the scandals that followed. The institutions I mentioned, groups within the military-industrial complex, security, media, finance, and research, are the basic components that theoretically move independently, but there is an organic relationship between all of them. What is the relationship? The core of this relationship is the financing that is provided by military and university institutions, meaning financial companies that fund all the manufacturing, media, and banking companies. Fourth, the banks, which have been concentrated into 4 or 5 large banks owned by financial houses. These banks contribute to the formation of financial houses, as the ownership of banks comes from companies, specifically financial houses. In the entanglement of relationships, the financial institutions, whether banking or monetary houses, also contribute to the financing of research centers and universities. If we consider that this connection is through money, it is also through people who move from one position to another. There is a policy called the revolving door, meaning that someone enters from one place and exits to another. For example, an official in politics may take a position in the administration, and when their term ends with a change in the administration, they either go to research centers, financial companies, or manufacturing companies, whether in the board of directors or in executive positions, depending on their expertise. In return, officials in manufacturing companies, research centers, or universities often enter the administration. This creates a mix of roles. In addition to this, the financial relationship is largely the same on the intellectual level, as universities in the United States today are no longer platforms for free thinking but rather for individualistic thinking, especially in fields like the humanities, history, politics, economics, sociology, and anthropology. Today, there is a belief that university students adopt these ideas and later implement them in policies. From here, we can understand why the American economic structure shifted from a productive economy, which prevailed even after World War II until the early 1960s, to a financial, rentier capitalist system by the late 1960s. This shift resulted from the intellectual shift in American universities, especially with the rise of neoliberalism. We won't go into details, as it is a long and complicated subject, but one example is the 1970s in Chile, where economic policies of liberalization, privatization, and financialization were implemented after the coup against Salvador Allende. The important thing today is no longer production. Rather, the focus has shifted to financial returns. This qualitative leap led to a change in the economic structure. The task became not increasing production to increase profits, but increasing wealth through the rise in company shares and financial speculation. From here, we understand the monetary policies that were carried out, pumping money into financial speculation, not investment. If we compare the results of the American stock market with the American gross domestic product, we see that the growth in the financial markets is many times greater than what happened in economic production. This transformation in the economic structure had political and societal repercussions, which means that the role of universities, which launched and spread these ideas across all sectors, is crucial. Today, in the media, everyone promotes the theory of liberalization and democracy in a specific sense, meaning that the intellectual basis of American policies, both domestically and abroad, is a product of this transformation in university structures. These policies are centered in research centers and implemented by institutions in companies, administration, or politics. In brief, when we talk about the deep state determining policies, it determines strategic options but not detailed policies. The detailed policies are left to the elected officials, by the way, through a process. The elected official, by the way, the election process has become a financial process more than anything else. Only the candidate who secures the largest funding can reach a position of responsibility. Of course, the candidates or those who work in the public sector are loyal to financial institutions or donors in a broader sense, not to the voters. The voter is merely a stage they must go through to give the illusion that they are the ones making the decision. However, to reach a position of power, they implement policies that align with the interests of their funders or the deep state. The deep state sets the general frameworks, and the administrations are the ones who implement them in detail. But when the administration's policies clash with the general trends, meaning the red lines set by the deep state that threaten its interests, we see that the deep state intervenes to control the overall direction. Controlling the rhythm is done through either welcoming or intimidating political officials, even at the presidential level. For example, presidents who have disobeyed or challenged the deep state, such as Robert Kennedy or Richard Nixon, when he wanted to withdraw from Vietnam, were removed through fabricated scandals. Similarly, Jimmy Carter, when he attempted to reconstruct the intelligence establishment, was overthrown. Likewise, when a president believes he has the political ability to change or directly affect the policies or choices of the deep state, he is overthrown. Today, in my estimation, Biden was forced to step down from running because his policy threatened the direct interests of the deep state, especially the financial institutions. Suddenly, we found that he was no longer considered suitable, although his political and mental condition had been deteriorating. They kept quiet about it until it became a direct threat to these interests. They then brought in Kamala Harris, thinking she could handle the job, but it turned out she was not able to fulfill that role. In the final weeks of the election campaign, we saw some media outlets, which are an essential part of the deep state, distance themselves from Kamala Harris, as if they were preparing to reach an agreement with Trump regarding the deep state. In my estimation, based on the appointments that are happening discussed in detail tomorrow, it seems clear that the deep state, through all its financial, media, military, and security branches, is the one that makes the decisions. These decisions result from the interaction of people who belong to these institutions and are linked to a clear political thought. It is not a vague or unclear agenda, but rather a programmed approach. They cannot think in any other way. Trump's phenomenon is an example. He wanted to change the system, so his first term was constantly questioned, and he was overthrown by the end of it. Today, he has returned with renewed support because the public in the United States has begun to reject the deep state's policies. This is where we stand at the moment. How things will turn out is a topic for another research, but this, in brief, is the topic of the deep state. The deep state limits strategic options while leaving room for the administration to implement decisions, whether it is a Republican or Democratic administration. However, when there is disobedience or when red lines are crossed, the pace is controlled through one method or another, either through intimidation or enticement. For example, we saw a figure like Obama, who came into power in 2008, based on the recommendations of the Baker-Hamilton Committee, which represented the interests of the deep state. Obama was brought in to hide the divisions within the Democratic and Republican parties in Congress and outside of it, representing all these interests, media, companies, politics, etc., to get out of the predicament caused by George Bush's policies. Obama's primary task was to address the long financial crisis and the mortgage crisis. He did the impossible to support financial companies that had gone bankrupt and were on the verge of collapsing the U.S. economic and financial system. How was he rewarded after leaving the White House? He was invited to give lectures, earning $400,000 to $500,000 per lecture. This can be seen as a deferred bribe, rather than bribes given during office. In contrast, Biden did things differently. While in office as vice president and later as president, he did not follow the traditional method of rewarding political officials after their term. Instead, he acted more like a gang leader or mafia boss. This led to a breakdown in relations between the institutions of the deep state, resulting in the decision that he and anyone associated with him must be overthrown.
مالية أكثر من موالاة أكثر، يعني لا يستطيع أن يصل إلى